Hello and welcome to Coming Home with Mama T. I'm your host, Tiara, aka Mama T. And on this podcast, we explore the journey of creating the life of our desires through mastering manifestation, maintaining a positive mindset, and living luxuriously. I'm a healer and a mentor, and I love helping people who value living an extraordinary life. And today we have a very special guest. We have Wysteria Root here, and she is an oracle, intuition mentor, and a spiritual seeker, and the host of the Luminaries podcast. So, welcome, Wysteria. Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you for that wonderful intro. Also, just for bookkeeping purposes, my podcast is The Learning Luminaries.
Aha, the learning. Thank you for that correction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Perfect. So let's just like dive in. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I started, well, so I've always had a very active intuition, very deep connection with like spirits and my internal world and my imagination. Like I have been a writer and a creator throughout my whole life. And so that kind of essence and energy of inspiration has always felt very spiritual to me. And then throughout my life, I've always been driven really heavily by creativity and by kind of like my own inner ability to manifest something out into reality. And so I started studying like witchcraft and elemental magic mostly and earth-based practices really, really young, probably at like 8 years old. I started reading tarot when I was 13. And then I've just been building and building and building on that ever since. And now I've started professionally reading tarot 3 years ago at the Renaissance Festival in Wisconsin. And since then, I've read at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. I've read at the Arizona Renaissance Festival. I've read at the one in North Carolina. I've done a festival in North Carolina as well. I also, like a different one, I also have read in other like big music festivals like Floyd Fest in Virginia and stuff like that. And so doing these one-on-one interviews and interactions with people where I am giving like my best days are 40 people a day, right? And so I'm giving them these accurate readings, and it's been really powerful to see the way that the practice works and has a deep resonation with people. And then also it's just been really exciting for me to figure out a way to make a lasting impression and a lasting change, because when there are so many people, I want to be able to serve as many people as possible, but also like doing it in this one-on-one setting, you only get to meet with somebody for like 10 minutes or 5 minutes or something like that. And so that's where my program, the Inner Eye Initiation, sort of started, is because I was like, I want to be able to give people the ability to do what I've done for myself, to be able to do this work for themselves, because I really believe that we have divinity within us and that there isn't a single person who can like that you have to go through to connect with your soul. Like you just sometimes need a friend to tell you, this is how I did it. Like, let's experiment, let's play around together and figure out what it is that like resonates with you. And so my journey is like steeped in exploring my ancestry and past life memories, which I've been having since I was really young as well. And then that's another big part of my practice, is that I want to make sure that we are honoring and respecting like world culture in individual ways, while also being able to explore our own histories and bringing that to life. And so it's like finding this balance of like honoring and respecting and finding like close practices, and then like being able to like honor that, and then also being able to lean into like, what did my ancestry do, right? Like if I have these people and I can connect into that feeling, even if you've lost your ancestral story because like your family doesn't know and you haven't done DNA tests or whatever, like that memory is literally inside of your body, it's literally inside of your blood. So being able to feel into your own wisdom and to explore that and to let that come to life through you is something that I really love watching and helping facilitate for other people.
Oh, that is such magic and so deep, especially coming from someone who, I have done my ancestry and like 23andMe and all of that, but it's so much work when you're not when your family doesn't know, right? Like it's like, okay, like I know who my grandmother is and like that's about it, right? And so it's really nice to have some pieces kind of fall together. And the more you take that time to really sit and acknowledge, and you might not necessarily hear a name in the beginning, but if you really sit with yourself and really connect in, people, the ancestors will come forward. And I heard you say past lives. So can you talk a little bit about one, what's the difference between like ancestry work and like past life work, and how does that all kind of come together?
Ooh, that's such a good question. This is going to be such a fun episode. um, uh, so ancestry work, I like to think of it as like the body story, right? Like your body is the reincarnation of thousands and thousands of people who have lived for thousands and thousands of years. Like your face is proof that like you have been loved time and time again, you know, and that's amazing and beautiful. And like it's also our geological history, right? Like this body has parts of people who carried themselves across the ocean and who survived famines and who survived all of these different things. And so it's like being able to remember the very practical, instinctual wisdom that our bodies have carried on and been passed on. That's kind of how I see ancestor work. And one good example of that is my ancestral work that has been the most powerful recently for me is I connect with my French ancestors through dancing. I have like traveler spirits inside of my lineage that have been nomadic people for a very long time. And when I dance, I can feel their story and I can feel their love and passion and things like that. And it moves through my body and it's awesome. And it is really healing. And then past life work is a lot more subconscious. So I have actually been training to be a past life regression therapist. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that, like, it's not like, yes, everyone can do it and access the information, but if you're going to a specialist for it, it's because generally there's some kind of blockage in your life that has no other possible explanation in your life, right? Like if you have this feeling that hasn't come from anywhere, but you've done everything that you can to try and like get rid of it, like the mindfulness, the therapy, the this, the that, the like understanding why, and like it just won't go away. There's this lingering feeling, and that's that karmic tie to an experience of your soul. And I think that our souls are who knows what the soul really is. First of all, this is all just hypothesis, you know? But it's
Right.
like this magnificent force that we're all connected to and that we return to and go back in from, and that like the collective consciousness is accessible through our own consciousness because we're a part of it, but we've also like our consciousness has holds on to frequencies of lives and experiences that it also participated in, if that makes sense. That we it's almost like remembering our the bodies that we've lived in. And so being able to access your past lives through your subconscious mind and being able to journey within is something that I'm really interested in helping people do, because it's like the rest of meditation, right? It's imagination and creativity and your story, and like how much of it is, yeah, you actually were blah 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 like this person, and how much of it is your subconscious mind. Well, there's a lot of practitioners who would say that those are like one and the same thing, you know. So yeah, that's my long short answer.
I love it. Some of the things that are coming up. So, in talking about like closed practices, and for those who might not be familiar, that is practices within the spiritual community, rituals that people feel only people from their ancestry should be working and their descendants should be working within. And while there are some things like, for example, we can talk about like smoke clearing or smudging. So utilizing the word smudging has indigenous ties to it. So maybe you do want to utilize sage or Palo Santo in your own personal practice, but calling it smudging would be incorrect if you were thinking of it as a closed practice if you are not from an indigenous background. So, and then thinking about that and then bringing the past lives conversation together. So what if, one, do you think that you have the same body, the same everything in each life, or do we have a mixture of ethnicities and nationalities and things that have happened to us over the course? And then I can take the next question from there.
That is such a good question. So some of my other experience with past life work is I've done a lot of it myself, but then when I started reading palms at festivals, if I touch so there's this thing called astrological palm, which
Mhm.
is where each section of the hand relates to a different planet. And so the very center of your palm is the mound of Pluto.
Mhm.
And so as a very like psychically sensitive individual, I had these wild experiences where I would touch with these two fingers the mound of Pluto, and then I started to see this person's journey and like different places that they've been. And so I can only speak from that experience, and I would be really curious to know what other people have experienced too. But I have found that like the past lives make sense with what the person looks like.
Mhm.
So like maybe it wasn't like I there have been like I haven't had experiences of somebody having like very strong like Eastern European descent and then them having like a very very distinct past life in like Africa or something like that.
Mhm.
But I have had very distinct past lives of them like experiences of them living in like a Eastern European country before it was called what it's called now, way 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 before like our modern recorded history. And then I've had experiences of people who like so I don't know because I think that like I think that it also depends. People are so dynamic and they're from so many different places in the world, and so are their lineages in their lives that it's hard to say like
Yeah.
what that looks like. I would say that everything that you take from a past life experience as far as like the closed practices go is like you have to run that through a modern context.
Mhm.
So even if I am like even if you do have a past life experience and you're like a white person in this life but you were like living in Africa in another life, then I would say that like you have to be mindful of the context of what that looks like now and those practices now and the privileges now and the body that you're in now, and use that experience to have a deeper reverence for the people who are like carrying on that the transmutation of that energy. Because the reason why a practice is closed is generally because it has some kind of like historical event or feeling or experience that has been attached to the energy. So like with sage, there's a lot of history that is deeply woven into like the genocide of the indigenous American people. And so
Mhm.
if you're not giving proper respect to that energy while you're working with it, you're not really understanding the medicine of the plant. And so I think that like I don't know the answer of like if people have different lives from different places because in my experience no, but I've also seen people have like lives on different planets though, so like what's that
Yeah.
about? I don't know.
I
So
love it,
that's what I think.
but that was a beautiful way to answer the follow-up question of saying that, yeah, like we have to still put it within that modern scope to be respectful. And I love the being able to utilize the plant medicine, right? To have that proper intentionality so that you can utilize the medicine in its full context, which is phenomenal. Oh, I love it. This is such a great
The
conversation.
plant is part of the consciousness, right? Like it has its own sentience, it has its own story, its own energy, its own feeling. And so if you're just like it's kind of the difference of like using a plant and working with a plant. If
Mhm.
I'm working with like I like to use so a Celtic practice for like smoke cleansing is called seining,
Mhm.
and I use rosemary for it because it is very good. It has like this very spiritually protective, peaceful energy. And so when I'm working with it, I'm talking to it and I'm letting its essence like fill the space rather than like me enacting its force. I'm welcoming its presence.
Yes. Ooh. And that feels different energetically. And I feel like questions are going to come out, but it's part of that exploration that we kind of talked about in the beginning where we have to, yes, it's great to have someone to facilitate these conversations and facilitate our experience, but we also have to go on our own personal journeys sometimes and allow ourselves to discover, allow ourselves to find how it resonates within us. I love the, like, because you said earlier, like asking a friend for some help, and like you find what you've done, right? And you're like, this is how I tap into, and this is what it looks like for me. And then when you're talking to that friend and you're like, okay, cool, let me try it, because I know in my own personal practice I'm like, all right, I have one friend tell me this, let me try it. Okay, this kind of works, but it doesn't feel complete. And then I have another friend that says this, and I'm like, oh, that brings it full circle, and you give it a little bit of try. And so we get to play and make our own practice our own within, our own, like, making sure that we're honoring what we're using and how it's used, and inviting everything in and connecting into ourself and spirit and whatever entities, deities, and everything that we believe in, we get to choose for ourselves, which is so powerful.
So juicy. I'm having another thought about what we were talking about like if you have a past life in a body that is wildly different than your own. I
Mhm.
think that when you come back to this body, that's the consciousness saying that like you, from the perspective that you're in, can help people that are in a wildly different experience than you, and that it's kind of like almost your responsibility to like explore what you can give, right? Because if
Mm.
there's a reason like why you're connected to that, it's because there's something there. There's something to learn from. And so I think that it's definitely like an invitation to learn from a respectful outsider's perspective. And that probably has a lot of really sacred medicine in it.
Ooh, that's so powerful. I love it. Can you talk a little bit about like, because I don't have a lot of people that show up here that have actually spent majority of their life doing this work. It's usually something that's like popped up in like the beginning. So can you talk, or like later in life, and some sort of like catalyst has happened and then they explore. Can you talk more about how were you supported through your journey from like childhood to now, do like exploring all these different parts of yourself?
Thank you. It has been very intense. Like ever since I was born, I've just had a very intense story in all aspects, right? Like from the day that I was conceived, let alone the day I got here. And
Oh.
so part of that is just knowing that there's been this mission and this something other than like an ordinary experience, because I like looked at my own experience and my peers and I could not relate to them at all, which made it really easy for me to like lean into spirit because I needed support. And the way that I got that was through like my ancestral connection to like the side, like I wasn't allowed to see my dad's family when I was a kid. And that was a big deal to me. And they are super Scottish, like very druidic family. And so I would work a lot with the fairies, and that's why I got into elemental magic when I was a kid, is because I was working with like the energy and the story of this side of my family that I wasn't allowed to have
Mhm.
contact with in my physical life. And that was a huge deal. And like my aunt is very into magic, but I remember she would always get me like Christmas presents that were like books and crystals and like all these things. But there was one time, I think I was 13, and she did a ritual and it scared her and she stopped doing it. And it blew my mind because I had been doing rituals all the time for a long time leading up to that,
Right.
right? Like every bath I take is a ritual. Every time I'm like making skincare for myself, it's a ritual. Like there's just so many ways that I would infuse magic into my life. And so I never had that experience of being scared of my power until I like left my home and had my own experiences and then came face to face with like my shadow and like my dark night of the soul experience, right? That started when I was 20, and I honestly don't know if I'm even out of it yet because
Mhm.
like the last 3 years have been so like hedge walking is this concept of like walking through the brambles, the difficult parts of the in between spaces of the known and the unknown in order to gain wisdom and bring it back to the collective. And I feel like I've been doing that. I have been a traveler. I've been living with the people of the Renaissance Festival is like the number one way to get really comfortable with your magic, because there's a lot of very magical people there who are also looking for ways to understand themselves too. And so
Mhm.
it's been this process of like, I'm an avid seeker, and also like spirits come to me, entities come to me, people talk to me about their witchy experiences. I've always been like, during COVID, I like facilitated little socially distanced witchy book clubs for people. And like, so it's just been this through thread of like my life. And then as when I got on the road in 2021, it just like blew up from there. It just got more and more and more real. So I got really into my spiritual journey. Like I had another spiritual awakening during the pandemic when I was alone all the time inside of
Right.
this apartment with my like very mismatched relationship with like my current, or like my past ex-fiance. um And I just realized I looked at everything and I was like, I am living so incredibly out of alignment. Like I am living from a place of pain, of from a place of like shame and fear of myself and my own desires and like this need to just like sacrifice like my own light for safety. And that is dumb. And I'm done doing that. And so it
Mhm.
took me a lot of courage, but I like moved into my SUV, which I had wanted to do for a long time, and then started traveling. And now I've given over probably like over 20,000 readings to people. I've had profound friendships. I've gotten crazy impact in all the different ways. And now it's like ramping up to this next level and I'm going deeper and deeper. And also, in January, I had like this really tragic accident happen within my family that's just been like the most jarring spiritual awakening because it's caused me to really like lean into the belief of all of these things that I've like just known.
Mhm.
And it's also like sown more doubt in my journey than I've ever had before. And that's where I'm at right now, and it's scary. But I'm embracing it, and I'm using this grief as like a sacred teacher, right? Like the plant medicine, the emotional teacher of grief has been very spiritual experience for me as well.
Mm. I love the trust that you have in yourself, and I think that's really powerful as we move through this. And like and that's a big part of the self-awareness of when we have these moments that are like kind of, I don't like the word testing. I don't like to think that the universe is testing us, but that's kind of what it feels like. It's like testing our faith within ourselves and what our inner knowing is. And it's like, we're looking for examples of the validation that we're right, but sometimes we don't get that like clear cut validation. It's just like we just have to know and be like, you know what? Okay, like this is happening and I don't know exactly what it means right now, but I know what my truth is. And so I'm going to keep going. And then we'll see on the other side what actually shows up that really will show me that I know, like that will solidify exactly what I know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good way to put that.
Ooh, I see you have some cards there. What deck are you using right now?
I do. This is the Oracle of the Hidden Worlds by Lucy Cavendish. This is the box. It's got these
Mm.
beautiful flower of life on the back of it. Can I pull a card for the collective?
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay. We're gonna see. I love this deck because it talks about this multidimensionality. Um, the hidden worlds being like that space of spirit. The gathering. Ah, that's so perfect. Community, kinship, and companionship. And there's this
Oh,
beautiful group of like light beings here in the center of this pillar. One of the other things about my spiritual experience is that I've had these miraculous visions and memories of things that I know to be real and cannot perceive on this like three-dimensional level. And one of those is this place that has so it's a ocean planet and it has or like ocean environment. I don't even know if it's not Earth or if it's just really old. Like it's whatever it is. And it's like the sky is bright pink and then the water is like vast and deep and flowing. And on the shore, which is made out of black sand, there is this almost like geodesic, like organic glass dome altar space that has these like bells that hang down from the corners so you can like hear them. And in the middle here, it's just this place of peace, this place of kinship and community and gathering. And it's like this beacon point. And when I feel into that place, it feels so peaceful and serene and like home. And then I look over to the side of the shoreline and there's this like beautiful cliffside that's super vast and tall. And this place that's just made out of like glass, but not glass. It's like a different kind of stronger material and it collects the light and the energy from the world. And it's this whole functioning system and society and place. And I've seen pictures that other artists have illustrated of Lumeria and it looks like that, but I'm hesitant to call it that because it feels like something more than what I understand right now.
ooh, I love that. And I love the energy. And like that card, it's so perfect because it's just like, I'm building this community, right? And I call it home. And I even heard you say the word home, and I was like, ah, because my goal or like what I'm really envisioning right now for myself is to actually create a retreat space, and I want it to be on a beach. I want it to be next to some salt water, that cleansing tide, right? And then with that, it's just like I want people to come and connect and connect in with both self and other people, this like-minded, beautiful, warm, open vibration. And I just want to facilitate that kind of space. So it's just like, ooh, this feels so good to hear you talk about that.
It's funny that you say that because the background that you have behind you is literally the exact color of the sky. And I've been having this vision for years.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. I love the synchronicities. This is like so magic. And I literally just recorded another episode talking about expecting the extraordinary. And so for those who have heard that episode, know like this is like the exact kind of thing that you're looking for when you're expecting the extraordinary. It's not like I'm on a first class flight or anything crazy, but this is extraordinary to me. So focus in on these little moments like that in life.
Thank you for saying that. I totally agree with you. I'm wondering, you said that you have like one of your specialties is helping people with that positive mindset.
Yes.
And something that I've been experiencing in this chapter of my journey is like being able to shift out of my own fear and my own like sadness, I guess it would be a good word for it, has been harder for me than it ever has been before. And I'm wondering if you could just like share your perspective on how to shift out of those like dense frequencies, because I know that it's necessary for us to feel our grief and for us to express our fear and not to repress them. But it's like, I don't want to sit in them. I want to be able to move through them. And I feel like you're going to have some really good insight.
Yes, yes. So within that, like we have these heavy emotions, and I want us to understand that one, it's like a flow, it's like a spectrum. Like we don't have to always be happy or always be like, we have space to allow ourselves to sit and feel and ask ourselves, what can I learn from this moment? Where can I go? What is the expansion that's coming from this grief, this sorrow, this sadness, this shame, judgment, whatever it is that we're feeling that we're not really comfortable with? What is the lesson from this discomfort? And I find when we kind of figure out what it is that we're supposed to learn, or taking out supposed to, because it's not my favorite, but like what can we learn from this moment, that gives us a little bit of space to kind of like break it off. And when we have these more dense, heavier feelings, it's not going to necessarily be a one time, like, let me sit in meditation and I'm going to learn something and then it's gone forever. It's going to take some practice, but we can, practice into maybe like going from the grief perspective. A lot of grief comes from loss. So we wouldn't feel the grief without having some moment that could be like we can be grateful for, right? So like we wouldn't have that grief if we didn't lose something that we loved. So being able to fall into the gratitude of like, man, I'm so grateful that I at least had that past experience, that moment. And you know what? That moment isn't lost from me. Like I can still bring that part back. I can bring that love back. I can bring these experiences back, and I can say thank you. And then I can also look at, okay, well, what can I do now? And how can I connect in now? Especially when we lose like a person, I do believe that we can always connect in with their energy. Even if they've reincarnated onto this plane again, I still feel like we can tap into what they symbolized for us in this current life. And so we can tap in and know that we're not alone, right? We love them, and we can still share that and move forward. And so opening ourselves up to that love and that gratitude will allow any of those things that we're still holding on to stay and be honored, but still allow us to shift to a point where eventually it kind of like sifts away like sand, right? Like, the wave is washing over it. I love all the water imagery coming in today, but like, you hold like sand in your hand, and then like if you've ever put your hand kind of in the shallow end of the ocean, and there's like sand, and as the wave kind of goes over it, the sand kind of like dissipates and it goes away and it washes and it washes, and we just keep washing away those denser feelings until they are gone. Or maybe there's a little bit of granule still like in the lines of our hand that we tap into from time to time, but we can always just say thank you for that reminder. Thank you for reminding me that I have these memories, and I can honor them and love them and hold on to them, and then move forward.
I really resonate with that. And a little breakthrough moment that I had as I was listening to you is that it really is also like embracing the act of forgiveness
Hmm.
is one of the things that we can do to just change the world,
Oh yeah.
right? Because there is, if you're able to forgive, especially with people who are gone, right? Like
Yes.
there's that energy of like, well, now this story is done, and like, what do I do now that there's this like moment, this pain point that is so frustrating that I don't want to forgive it. But like, you have to be able to forgive yourself. You have to be able to forgive that person. And if you're able to forgive somebody who passed that left you with a lot of pain because you can remember the strength of your love that you had while they were alive, that I think is just like powerhouse spiritual energy. You know,
Oh
like there is
yeah.
not a single person you'll meet in your everyday life that you cannot have incredible compassion for as well. So,
Oh, it's so beautiful. Like I'm currently in a program and it's all about like charisma, and one of the things they talk about is like, all right, well, you have a choice. You can choose to have compassion and curiosity and all of this for one person, or you can choose to cut them off. But if you choose to cut them off and you want to be in your power, then you also have to choose not to villainize them, right? So that's kind of like where that like forgiveness comes in. Like you can't forgive and still be like a victim to their behavior, right? So we have to just like kind of let that go. And so it's I mean, it can be hard work. It takes a lot of emotional and spiritual maturity to just be like, all right, well, like I feel like you did me wrong, but I forgive you, and I'm never going to bring it up that you did me wrong because that's not forgiveness.
mm-hmm. That's also interesting because it leads back into this topic of past lives, right? Like the blockage that carries through lifetimes is a lack of forgiveness in some ways, and a
Hmm.
lack of like closure. So you're repeating this lesson, you still haven't let go of whatever it is that's carrying on with you. And so maybe sometimes it's distance, and maybe sometimes it is creating those healthy boundaries, and in order to do that you have to like forgive the fullness of whoever this person is that brought up this energy, or even forgiving yourself for mistakes that your soul has made in this lifetime or in others that you remember, right? Like, we are also, I think it's important to remember that like humans are really young, like
Hmm.
as a species. And so it's miraculous that we are as kind and compassionate as we are, and that as we've become in the last like, I don't know, couple generations, right? And we're by no means perfect, and there's obviously still a lot of pain and conflict, but the amount of people who are actively seeking to bring unity is greater than ever before, and they have a greater reach to connect with one another. So it's like, what a wonderful time to be alive, to be kind of these resolvers, is almost how I think about it. Where like there's a whole generation of cycle breakers. And so like what happens after we create this new paradigm, it'll be much kinder.
Oh, I love that. I love that because it's like when you think of it as there's so many different animals on this planet, and like humans are animals, just we have a different sort of, we have emotions, and we can choose to be in that like fight or flight parasympathetic mindset, just like, like a deer caught in headlights. And I love that analogy. Or we can choose to be like, know and have this awareness of like, I know what's around me, I know what this thing is, and connect to it. So wow, that's like super powerful. That and the fact that we can see the world from the fact that there's so many people that are actually doing good versus seeing the world about all the people that are doing bad, and what side do we want to be on when we, or if you want to define good and bad that way, but
Also because the people who are doing the things that are categorically bad, right, are doing them from a place of hurt, right?
yeah.
They're and in their minds they likely think that they're doing good, or they're doing the best that they can for themselves.
Hmm.
So it's like when we're able to look at that with compassion and openness, and saying like, I'm sorry that like you've been hurt to the point where you feel like this is your only option. It's not. Like, let's figure out more options together. I think that that is like a really beautiful thing that's opening up inside of the consciousness too. I also like to think of humans as, well, all living things. Okay, hold on. I think that Earth is a living sentient being. I
Mm.
think that humans are cells inside of this living sentient being that process thought and choice and like building and creativity. That is like our role inside of the system of the cosmos, and that just like we have all of these cells inside of ourselves on like the bigger scale, like Earth is probably a cell inside of a larger body. And
Right.
so it's this like ripple effect.
Oh, yes. I love the ripples. And then, like, if we think about it, because everything is made up of essentially ripples, like waves. Yes. We're all
Mhm.
made up of waves. If we go like in the scientific, like under the all of the microscopes and da da da, da, everything is a wavelength, and that is frequency, right? And so if we can eventually all get to that same frequency of love and compassion for one another, that's that whole paradigm shift and how beautiful and wonderful this world is going to be once we all start to vibrate at that same high level, just juicy, decadent, cozy frequency.
Yeah. And the thing that I love too about that is that like frequency and vibration are the overall like ha- way you're doing things, not what you're doing,
Hmm.
right? It's the essence behind your intention. It's not like if you're donating all this money but it's out of spite, right? Like that's not high vibe. But if you're like, I don't know, having a period of time where you're having to like heal and you feel like you're like not in your high vibe because you're sad or whatever, like if you're doing it from this place of healing, then that is still you vibrating in the forward frequency of this new paradigm because you're able to be accepting and loving and compassionate and curious. I think that one of the biggest things that people can do to embrace like a high vibe mindset is inviting curiosity into their
Hmm.
everyday, like asking why and leaning into the feeling and just and exploring and expanding an idea rather than shutting something down or responding to it saying yes or no or quantifying it as good or bad, right? You asking the because and looking behind the surface level of things is the little secret key into getting your vibe higher.
Oh yes, curiosity is so good. And like, because when we cut things off, that's ending the wave, right? We're ending the wave. We're ending if we're like talking, having a conversation, right? And someone, I don't know, gaming is such a great one. Like, someone's really into gaming, and then someone else is like, gaming's for nerds, right? And if you because you don't like it or it's not for you, and then you essentially start using language that devalues something that somebody else uses, you're no longer curious, and that cuts off the conversation, it cuts off the connection, it shuts down the wave, and then that's where the vibe shifts, right? Even if we're like not necessarily like, I'm not trying to be mean, but whatever, but like the wave is not there for like connection and alignment to flow together.
Yeah, criticism is like the shadow polarity of curiosity.
Yes. I love
Totally.
it. I love it. I love it. So, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today?
Give yourself time to feel instead of like scrolling or constantly being busy or like throwing yourself into 1,000 projects. Like, really just give yourself time to sit with yourself without any other stimulus in the discomfort of whatever shows up, and then give that part of yourself compassion.
Mm.
Like, the best thing that you can do is give yourself the space to reveal yourself. Like, when people say take up space, like give yourself permission to take up space, it means don't just speed through the important things that are being brought to your consciousness. Don't just avoid them, right? Really, really allow yourself to open up and to feel into the fullness of your experience and what's happening right now, because that is the map and the doorway and the key into the manifestations that you desire.
Oof. That is so big and beautiful and wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing. Oh, I love it. I love it. I want to say on top of that note, just when we allow ourselves that space and that time, when we don't try to like rush forward, I can speak from experience here. When we're trying to push through it, we end up having to go back to the start and relearn that lesson until we fully open ourselves up. So if you think that you're going to go faster by just like running through the lesson, it's doesn't work that way. We end up having to cycle back. So allow yourself to just be open now and feel into it and move through it. and then go forward, because then otherwise you're just going to cycle, and that's where the speed and the quantum leaps are going to come in. So
Yeah. I'm also hearing just one last little bit is
yeah.
it's the mixture between aligned and perfect action, like regularly taking those like imperfect but intentional steps towards the right direction, and then also um trusting that no matter what, you're going to be given the right opportunities that you need. Because like when we're rushing, it's because we're like, I'm gonna miss it, I'm not gonna do it, I'm gonna mess this up. And like, but if it's your destiny, baby, it's not going anywhere. It's
Yeah.
for you. And like you have to, you like whatever you're asking for, you'll receive as long as you create the capacity to receive it. So put yourself in the places to enact the changes and the desires that you're looking to like see grow, but then also trust that it's coming. Because it is.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Wisteria. Thank you. All the links and everything to how to connect will be in the show notes. So make sure to follow on Instagram, Facebook, book an oracle reading, and all sorts of other magic that you can. And as well as with me, you know, www.mamateenergy.com. It's also in the show notes where you can access the home membership and so much more fun stuff there. And with that, I will say ta-ta for now. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.